Hi everyone, we're ready and looking at the level 1 screening tools. So looking at the required components and possible screening tools, there are some that we have already learned, so we're not going to duplicate that work um, in this course. So phonological and phonemic awareness can be done through the PASS or Kilpatrick's PAST, and both of those were taught in Multisensory 1. So we're not going to repeat assessing that section. Alphabet knowledge can be assessed through DIBELS. DIBELS has an alphabet assessment, so we're not going to worry about that one. So now we are at the sound symbol recognition, and of these suggested assessments, we haven't addressed any of these yet. So I chose for us to look at the quick phonics screener, and that's the one that you are going to administer. So I have linked you to, or attached, the quick phonics screener so that you have the directions, and I thought I would just go through it real quickly with you. This is what you can say to the student if you want to use the script. And then be sure that when they're at the names task, be sure they name the letter Q and not the QU sounds. For the sounds task, be sure it's the short sound for each of the vowels. So if they say the long sound, you can say, that's one sound that the letter makes. Do you know a short sound for that letter? Or even another sound for that letter? And hopefully they would give you the short sound. So procedures for administration, you would start at the beginning unless they are in grade 3. Then you get to skip to task 2A. I ask you to use your judgment with that because I know I've had third graders that were non-readers. So it would be much more beneficial to me to start at the very beginning. And if they do well there, we're building their self-esteem and they're able to feel successful on some assessments. So you may follow this if you like, or you may follow my way. I just like to be sure my bases are covered and that I don't frustrate my students. So moving from task to task, if they miss 5 words in a task, you move on to the next one. In task 2A, which is where you would start for grade 3, if they miss 5 words, you would go on and finish up 2B because they're together. I'm going to show you that in a minute. But then you would want to go backwards and administer the letter sounds, and that's task 1B. So see, this is already a situation that could happen and we have to go backwards, and I would just rather not go backwards. You're going to administer each section of each task. So there is always a words in isolation and then a words in text. Even if they miss too many words in isolation, you will always still do the next part, the words in text, because we all know that we have those kiddos that can identify those words in text and have great difficulty with that in isolation. And that is just a strong characteristic that we see in struggling readers, especially those with dyslexia. And I'm thinking Dr. Shaywitz in Overcoming Dyslexia, she really talks about how bright dyslexics are, in that they have developed these compensatory strategies and they have figured out how to use other ways to help them figure out the words. So in a sentence, or in text, they can use the context of the words around them. So that's why it's so important that you do the rest of that task. For error correction in this assessment, if they don't know a word, tell them to skip it and move on to the next one. Do not read the word for the student. If the student starts to appear frustrated or tired, you can stop. You don't have to assess all of the tasks, but we want to assess as many as we can so that we have a sufficient amount of information. And we know that when we take information to our teams and our schools for consideration for RTI or for additional assessment, we need to be sure that we have data and that we are well documented. So I go as far as you can, even if you have to pick it up the next day. When the student misses 5 words in the word box, then you move on to the words in text. If they miss, if they miss 5 words in the word box, move to the words in text. Then go to the next word box task. If they miss 5 words again in that word box, so that's 2 in a row, complete the task. So let them do the sentences, and you can stop the assessment at that point. It is important to note that as a teacher or as the assessor, you could choose to continue and administer the additional tasks to gain further information, because we know, especially with dyslexic students, that there are holes in their learning, or gaps. So they may have difficulty with 2A, but by the time we get to 4A, they're great. So I would ask you to consider that, but also to be sure and use your knowledge of the student and really watch your student, because we don't want to frustrate them. So it's a very, very fine line we walk. When you're scoring it, you want to make mark errors, make notes and comments to help you remember how the student responded. The student should read the words as whole words. They should not be sounding them out in order to be a correct response. We want to see that they can read words, that they are starting to have some automaticity with their words. They're not having to still break it down into those individual phonemes. So if they're sounding it out, they don't get credit, only if they say the whole word. The QPS is scored by each individual task only. So record the ratio of correct responses over the total number possible. So if there's 21 possible and they got 13 correct, that would be 13 out of 21. For task 2B, 3B, 4B, 5B, and 6B, that is where they're reading the words in context. Only the underlined word, the word in context that we are looking at, counts. So only that one matters if it's right or wrong. You might want to make note or comments about how well the other words are read for your informational purposes, but it does not count against them. Okay? And there are grade levels listed above each task, and I always say to use those with caution because in every assessment they are approximate and they're just, just not necessarily 100% this is the rule or this is right. So just kind of keep that in your mind. You really can't use this assessment to determine their grade level, but you can determine their strengths and weaknesses in phonics skills. And mastery for this assessment is 90% and above. Okay? This is your scoring form. So if you were doing section 1 is letters and its names. So they would read all of the letter names. And then part B they would go through this again and they would do the sounds. Okay? If they made it to 2A, they're just reading these words. 2B, they're reading them in text. And the underlined word is what counts. Okay? So if you notice, it goes up, there's 4 through 6 even. This is a class summary that you could use. So you could list your students, you could put an X where they have been mastered, and so then you can look at where your holes are, and that would be a great way to do some instructional grouping of your students. Okay, and then this is the student copy. So they don't see anything about grade level, they just see letters and words. Okay, so again, for these purposes, you can pull this up on a device or you can print it. That is completely up to you. I'm just going to scroll through this quickly because I don't, yep, that goes all the way to task 12. There's nothing else at the end. Okay, so good luck with this assessment. Please let me know if you have any questions or need any help during giving or scoring. Good luck.